answer your question kind of as we go, and we've got some good questions here.
Our leadership team came together and looked at our population of students, what their needs are, where they are in their learning, and really saw that we needed to bump up the higher level thinking at our school. So we had John Burrell come and teach us about inquiry-based instruction. He was amazing. He was great. We loved seeing him. I've seen him twice now, so I feel like the second time I could catch so much more than the first time I saw him speak. We took what he taught us, and this was one of our big units that we started with, and we kind of came up with our own steps for our team collaboration process to put this in place.
One of the first steps that we did was we took our units of study and we made a 9 weeks overview and try to piece together things that would mesh well as far as what kind of theme we can use. So we looked at each of the units and looked for opportunities to integrate them. And then we chose the money unit and the goods and services unit in social studies to integrate in order to build that thematic unit.
We decided what we wanted the kids to know, not just what was in the curriculum documents, but also what we want them to know as an adult, just important things. So we made our web about money. We know that that's kind of a struggling skill for our second graders. We knew that we wanted to spend more time on that anyway, and it was also one of the easiest things to make real life because you use money all the time. So we made our web. And then what was different about that for us is that we added a Save, Spend, Donate and included some of the Parkside Scholar Initiative in our planning from the get-go. That was really important to us. We also saw when we made our big picture plan that we had goods and services coming up, so that we rearranged things. That was a natural fit to fit together how they're going to apply using their money. So we studied math, money, and in social studies, goods and services. So on our big storyboard, we planned at the top part math and at the bottom part social studies. So really we called the problematic scenario the idea of the market and the coins around the world, that we call it the twist, because it's just that it sets the framework for the whole rest of the unit.
And so we came up with what are some questions that the kids might ask so that we would be able to have an answer. Artifacts for for math was using the different coins from around the world. The kids were noticing that all the coins were round, and and then we showed them different coins that were not round in there. So every question they would think they knew the answer to, we would show them a way to to look outside of what they're used to. The questions that they would come up with is what do you do at a market, and where are they, and what different things can you buy at a market. And so those were some of the questions that the kids ended up asking, and we were able to use those as part of the lessons in the social studies unit.
So we planned our other lessons that have been successful before, and we added our supplies at the end, things that we would know that we would need. And we kept planning math and social studies, math and social studies, math and social studies for that whole unit. Okay, so at the very end, this was the best part. We had planned in social studies for the kids to be producers and consumers. So kind of they were more consumers during math and producers during social studies. So they were going to make pom-pom pals. So they had pom-poms and googly eyes, and they had a plan with their group, their company logo. They had to write a business plan. They had to ask for startup money. They had to decide how much all their supplies were going to cost. And then they got to build their little pom-pom pals with whatever theme their group came up with. So then on the very last day of the market, we had our Parkside market, and we walked out into the neighborhood space and looked at each other like, this could go wrong so many ways. I mean, it could really just be a disaster. The kids set up their desks, they set up their little booths and their signs and all their prices, and then we split half and half. They wore their uniforms, and they were making change and buying pom-pom pals, and they needed no assistance. They were completely, we could have gone back in the room and planned our next unit while they were working, because they were completely engaged. We didn't solve any behavior issues. Nobody had to sit out. Nobody was disruptive. They all were they even started lowering their prices because kids started running out of money. So they lowered their prices so that they could sell the rest of their goods. They learned so much about that. They could just totally do it on their own. And Russell was the bank, so if somebody needed help making change, he just had extra, but he would tell them what they needed. They would have to do it, and he would just check to make sure that it was right. So that was the most exciting part for us, was to see that they could do it on their own. And then they wrote their reflections, and they all said something different. I was surprised. I expected them all to say, we learned how to count money. Or they wrote, we learned about a startup plan. And somebody else wrote, I learned that you have to lower your prices if you want to sell everything. And somebody else wrote, I learned that I really do have to make change correctly, or the customer might be angry with me. They wrote all kinds of stuff that I wasn't expecting. So that was really exciting.
This is our data from our common assessment that we use in our district. And if you'll notice that these are the percentages of the students that performed, that mastered that. Our main focus is on our thematic units, where money, geometry, and measurement, and all of them were really high, even in the advanced math classes. Our problem-solving data is really low, and we used our traditional way of teaching the problems, and we didn't really focus a thematic unit like we did with the other units that were successful.
So for the kids, this doing instruction this way made a big difference because they knew their purpose from the get-go. We showed them the problematic scenario, and they came up with the questions, and then all of a sudden they're kind of in charge of their learning. They knew they needed to find out how to spend money, how to count money to be able to do the market. For the other units, they knew they needed to know geometry to be able to build the house for Santa that they were working on. So they came up with the questions, and really because we predicted what the questions were going to be, we didn't really have to wait for them to come up with the questions to plan our other lessons. We were afraid of that at first, but we didn't have to do that. We could predict what their questions were going to be and then use our lessons to teach it. And we could go back to their questions. Look, we answered this question today. That's so exciting. And then to get to do the market at the end, they'll never forget that. That was just great.
One thing I noticed was doing math the traditional way with your books out. Half of your classes is paying attention. The other half is, looking at the clock or finding out what other, how much more time till lunch. But when we did the market, it was truly 100% engaged. They were all wanting to know what the next step was. What do we need to know in order to be successful?
It was just so much more fun to be able to plan everything to fit together. It's more natural, I think, to put things together that way and integrate them rather than split it all up. And also, even though it was a really big project, it didn't feel like more work. It just felt like we were working smarter. It was, we could see what we needed to do and work on it a little at a time, and break it up. And we weren't doing 800 million, a big project in this subject and a big project in this subject. It was really one project that all worked together. So that's how it affected me in my teaching.
I feel that it was a lot easier to plan and finding the other ways away from the traditional math book, to get away from that and to use real coins and have those kids bring those in and take ownership of their learning. I think it made it a lot easier than, we need to do this page and we need to get to this far, and the kids really, led out the rate of the class.
Then for us as a team, it was fun for us as a team too. It was so nice. Like, if I were trying to do this by myself, there's no way that I could get it all done. But because we could sit around the table together and we were all on the same page and we could come up with this together, we could use everybody's strengths, so that, one person is really good at writing the letters to send home to parents, so they would do that part. Somebody else would make the problem-solving problems that would be integrated in, this unit. I think that really brought us together, helped us build a more collaborative relationship, that we were working on something together, not just doing the same thing side by side. I think that's important.
And I agree. I think when we do sit down together and we are focused on that one unit, we were able to just, bounce ideas off of each other and go, I want to do this. Oh, well, what about this? Well, let's do this. And we talked about, all the different things that we could bring to it, whereas if you did it by yourself or with one or two people, you wouldn't have gotten the magnitude of this unit as it was.
It took us, we started at about 8. It took us about 3 hours to do this whole section. And then we broke it up so each person had a different part to do. And when we come back together every Tuesday and work for about 45 minutes on what's the next piece that we need to have done. So we broke it into chunks. So it was just meeting consistently is what made the difference for us. And then being able to depend on each other to do their part. We all had to buy in. We all had to, have that relationship and be safe with each other to be able to say, listen, I know this was my part and I'm almost finished with it and I'll have it to you tomorrow. We really had to trust each other to do that. And then in the classroom, it didn't take more time. It was still our regular math time and our regular social studies time. We didn't have to do any fancy finagling of the schedule or change anything that way. We fit it into our boundaries that we already had.